Good morning and welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering your current events on your Thursday morning Rise and Shine. Current events this morning here as we look at this live talk program here. And now this morning our topic is the change in role of religion in America. Change in role of religion in America. I have two articles to share with you here this morning. And then after that, I'll be going into some Bible passages. So welcome again to our live talk program as we do our live talk program from Monday through Friday on your commute time and get up and rise time. Let us pray. We thank you, Lord, again for your love and the blessings of knowing thee. We thank you, dear Lord, for the wisdom that you give us and the insights that you give us. I pray, Lord, that as we observe and see things going on, dear Lord, that we might truly come into our keepings and our ways to thee. May you bless us, dear Father, as we study together. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. So this morning here again, we're looking at this important topic here, which is the change in role of religion in America. And as we slowly see this change from week to week, year to year, and with every new political cycle, it is interesting to make note of this and to make note of what's happening. And so I have two articles to share with you. And most naturally, what we're sharing and what we're talking about here is something that is biblical, is something that is in the Bible. The Bible predicts this would what would happen. And we see this happening amongst us. We see this push happening by the Christian church as it loses power. And we know this is a repeat of what happened in the past, what happened in the past history of humanity, as the Bible teaches very clearly that whatever has happened before has been done, and there's nothing new under the sun. And so human beings tend to do things the same way over and over again, repeat. And so we're seeing a repeat. So we know this will happen, and so I always want to keep a monitor on this. Now, in Revelation chapter 13, verse 11 through 16, I'm going to start off this morning with that. Revelation 13, verse 11 through 16. And the Bible predicts that before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, that certain things will be happening. And it's happening inside of America. Now, Revelation 13, verse 11 through 16 simply states that, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he caused all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads." So here the Bible outlines and states what will be happening in our time. Now notice here the image of the beast in verse 14. The image of the beast is as asked to be made for a particular reason. I'm going to read to you verse 14, and I'm going to explain what I understand all of this is stated. So if you go with verse 14 with me again, it says, "And he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by the sword and did live." Now that's the clause there that I find particularly interesting. It's not just is fascinated with this entity, but is fascinated at the fact that the entity, even though it was wounded, that it still survived. is still continuing. And the focal point there in my mind is this idea that even if things are going in a way that it ought not to go, the idea is still survival. The idea is how to perpetuate, how to continue. Now, if you notice here what's happening inside of the United States is that there's a focal point to keep the entity going, but the methods that it's trying to use to keep alive and to survive are methods that are not moral. They're not moral methods. They're not right methods. But the idea is to keep America alive. So this is kind of the psyche right now in the mindset of the people and the mindset of the politicians. So we see that this text is ripe for the fulfilling, because the whole idea is that we need to stay alive, and we have one entity that is still surviving and survived, but it survived doing immoral acts. So if you can survive doing immoral acts, then I would want to learn how you do that, because I'm not trying to, quoting them, I'm not trying to be moral, but I want to be able to stay immoral and stay alive. It's like somebody going to prison and they got caught, and so they didn't win, they lost. And they go in there with other prisoners and they can trade secrets of how to do crimes and not get caught. So the moment they're out, a lot of times they go back because they get caught again, but when they come out, they continue the criminal behavior because they were convinced that probably they could do it better next time. So that to me is an important thing. And when you've looked at what's been going on in America for the last probably 4 decades or so, I mean, it's always been like that, but it seemed to be more and more moving along with survival by the political leaders as they learn from religious leaders. That's to me is the focus here. And I'll show you why in a second. So if you look at the focus, you have, if you go online, you just look at like PNAC, Project for the New American Century. If you just search Project for the New American Century, and you look at think tank, who have this concept that they see America waning in power, and they want to keep America going for the next 100 years. And so they've come up with various different ideas of how to make America continue for the next 100 years. And some of the ideas has been war. One of the major ideas by people like Rubio, Marco Rubio, Jeb Bush, those kind of guys. And if you remember, Marco Rubio tagline for his campaign was the same idea of, keeping America going for the next century. So they want to keep America going, but the concepts that they had used were used by President Bush, the Bush Jr., and our number 2, and they were used, and it did not really work out too well. But those ideas were put in place way before 9/11. If you really go online again and look at what they were putting out, you'll find real quickly that the concepts and the ideas that they put out were something that were basically being schemed before 9/11, and then 9/11 was the opportunity to put it in place. And they put it in place, and it didn't work the way they were hoping it to work. The war was not as profitable, and they end up still costing America massive amount of money. It's a bleed basically, because especially the amount of injured troops. And I think they did not count on the Muslims to respond in such a vicious, violent way. So that's part of the problem. So if you look at it, you look at the plan by many scholars were ingenious. You create a boogeyman in the Middle East, and you bring your troops in the Middle East and take over the oil reserves. And you use those oil reserves to keep America funded. And you could keep it going probably for another 100 years. Anyhow, the plan backfired. It didn't work as how it was supposed to work. President Bush, even when he was leaving office, was still hoping that history will judge him more kindly as the plan, works out. And as I say, everything I'm saying here, you can just go and you can see it for yourself. So you look at this plan, right, and it didn't work. So then when all has failed, you always go to a different plan. Now, we know the Bible here now say that the real plan that they're going to use to keep this thing going is the blend of religion. And there's one entity that did that and survived. It is the Roman Roman government, the Rome itself. Because as Rome was losing power, Rome did all kind of things. They did foreign endeavors. They did a lot of foreign warfare and investments and stuff like that. And that didn't keep Rome going because Rome was dying from within. When that didn't work, they went to a lot of wars. That was something they always did, and that didn't keep Rome going. So they turned to the church at last to save it, and they converted Rome to a theocracy. So it's a religious political power, and that's what constitute today what we call the Roman Catholic Church. Is a church and a state in one. Is not a true church and it's not a true state. So what we see here is that the same pattern that Rome did, the Bible predicts that America will try to do it as it's waning in power. And America is doing everything else that is not working, and nothing will work. You could put a nice guy in there, so to speak, like a President Obama, that won't work. You put a tough guy in there who is basically vicious to even women, and that will not work. We can just predict that right here. It will fail. But one thing we notice that each election cycle, the role of religion becomes stronger, and you can check that back out by just going back and look at your history in the last how many elections, how each election cycle, more and more religion become a center focus of the religion of the political cycle. Each political cycle, religion become focal point, which is moving us towards the fulfillment of Revelation chapter 13, where religion now becomes the crutch to lead on. It's become an aid to save the system. But the problem is that the system is dying because of immorality. So the system is dying of immorality. And so the concept is, if you want to save a system that is dying from inside, because of the immoral practices of the citizens, the lifestyle of the citizens primarily, the biggest discussion we have in today is about healthcare. It's an important discussion about insurance. But even a bigger discussion is the volume of food the people eat. See, but you can't have that discussion because Americans are used to by now, overeating and killing themselves with foods. So we have to talk about insurance, but the insurance rates are going up every year because people are getting fatter and sicker every year. So that's a problem. So what do? You turn to the church to solve the problem, but the church themselves are dying. So it's almost like you have two people that are wounded and they need each other. One is shot in the left leg and one is shot in the right leg. And the two of them need each other because each of them are out of a leg. The two of them, I guess, can help each other walk. I don't know how that's going to work. But that's what it is. The church in trouble and it's dying. And the society is in trouble, so to speak, and it's dying. So how do you save the society and the church? So we go back to this text. Revelation 13 verse 14 at the end there says, which had a wound by the sword and did live. That to me is important because you have to go to the entity that did it before and still is existing. And the entity that has survived a very long time, even though it did it through wickedness, would be the Roman authority. And so now what we're looking at is that the state's leaders are looking to the church. And this is where the trouble is going to come in. Because in verse 15 it says, and he had power to give life to the image of the beast. Now the image of the beast is basically that what made the Catholic Church so powerful, what made the Catholic Church so unique, or what we call the Roman secular government that became one with the Christian Church. What made that entity unique and was able to survive, that it was able to quiet the voice of dissent or protest. That was what made it so powerful. It was able to literally not just quiet it in the sense of saying don't talk, but in the sense of you open your mouth, they kill you. And by doing that, well, things was in a degenerated state, but nobody could say anything about it. They just have to accept it. So it's almost like, you're operating a relationship, and the relationship is basically done But, one person is threatening the other person that if you leave me, I'm going to kill you. It doesn't make the relationship happy. It just makes the relationship continue. And it's not continue in a great way or in a happy way. It just exists. It's just there. It's just darkness and pain and suffering for both involved. But at least together they can say we're married. But it's not marriage, it's basically kidnap. One person is kidnapping the other person. So this is what was the power of the Catholic Church in those dark times. They were able to keep going, and they're still alive. They kept going. And today they're here as a monument to what wickedness and oppression can do for you. You can really do. It's like a thief. You don't have to work, but he can still eat. If he stops stealing, he's going to starve to death. You're going to get a job. So violence and criminality can keep you going. And you can perpetuate your existence and not do right. And so, but wars didn't work. So what we're going to do? Verse 15. And he had power to give life to the image of the beast. The image of the beast, as I understand it, is religious intolerance, persecution of dissent. That the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Notice here, because the intolerance is used to stop anybody from dissenting, even to kill them and cause them to worship. So here we believe that as America has a separation of church and state, that one day it will move from that in order to save itself by turning to the church. And as it turns to the church itself wants something. What church pastors want is people to come and worship God. But that type of worship is not true worship because it's forced worship. God can't be worshipped by force. So what happened? We're going to get to that in a little bit. And he caused it all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark on his right hand and in their foreheads. So this tells me that the worship issue, it will change. It will be an issue, a big issue. And some people say, but America is so secular. How is that possible? So I have 2 articles that I'm going to share with you that will demonstrate the slow change, as our topic here is a change in role of religion in America. I have 2 articles to display this to you, to show you that there's a constant change. And I can do this over and over again. There's so many changes in America that I can show you that the religious leaders, even though they're dying, their churches are dying, many of them, they're using their power and their influence because they see an opportunity, because America is waiting in power to grab power. So the first article I want to go to here is from ChristianPost.com, and it's entitled "A Visit Among Friends. Evangelical Leaders Pray Over Trump at Oval Office Meeting." A group of evangelical leaders pray over President Donald Trump in the Oval Office, with Vice President Mike Pence in attendance as well, following a meeting hosted by the Office of Public Liaison on Monday. The evangelical leaders met with President Trump and administration officials in the Oval Office. Johnny Moore, president of the Kairos Company and an attendee of the prayer meeting, snapped a photo of the laying on hands on Trump that is garnering immense attention on social media. In a statement emailed to the Christian Post, Moore described the event as a very special moment, but it was also not an unusual one. Various ones of us have prayed with him many times and have been praying for him for a long time. We believe we are a praying nation, and we begin by praying for our leaders, stated Moore. As you know, most evangelicals believe it's a sacred responsibility to pray for the president, and this is very much in our tradition as Americans who once took and sometimes still do take this responsibility serious. Moore also noted that while he and the other evangelical leaders have prayed for former President Barack Obama, it's different with President Trump, he says. When we are praying for President Trump, we are praying within the context of a real relationship, a true friendship, continued more, calling it a visit among friends. Evangelicals feel the door of the White House is as open as it has ever been before, even compared to Reagan, according to several that were there whose career began back then. When he first declared his presidency for Republican candidate nomination in 2015, Trump's relationship with evangelicals was a tenuous one. Many prominent evangelicals leaders endorse other Republican candidates, especially, listen to this now, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida and Ted Cruz of Texas. Remember, I mentioned Marco Rubio earlier. However, after securing the Republican nomination and since taking office, Trump's support among evangelicals have grown and remained steady despite his controversies. Moore is not the only evangelical leader to see the Trump administration as offering unprecedented welcome to evangelicals. Robert Jeffries, pastor of First Baptist Church of Dallas, told Christian Post in an interview in May that there has been no American president in history who has reached out to evangelicals to the extent that President Trump has done. People would be surprised at how many believers there are in the Trump's administration. Very dedicated Christian, Jeffries said. So here is a simply example here of what is changing. Here is noted many things at the end there. It says that many dedicated Christians are serving in the Trump administration. So think about all that's been going on. Think about the vitriol and all the stuff that's been said and done and all the rules that are being passed. This is being done at the behest, at the encouragement, the instruction, the consultation of people that are very devoted Christian. So then that's particularly interesting. These are Christians that are doing this in the White House. Very devoted ones. These are people who will be closer to heaven and God than any other people walking on the face of the planet. And then this is the type of things, you hear the type of things coming out of the White House, you say, wow. But notice here that normally with the evangelicals, if you saw the picture, since you can't see, but I'm sure you probably saw it on social media, or if you go online to Christian Post, it's right there at the top, christianpost.com. You saw the picture, you notice that it's primarily white evangelical leaders that are there. When I say primarily, there was nobody else, Hispanic or black, I could see. And they especially want to save the country, and so they're looking for a president that's going to help them do this. And as you know, with the separation of church and state, that the state does the state business and the church does the church business. If the two comes together, then each of them are current favors with each other. Each see the other as important to its survival. The state adopts the church and the church adopts the state. This is what the future looks like in America. And what that will do is that one of the questions people have been asking that says, with all the scandals and everything that's been going on and all the things that are happening, why would everybody believe that the president has power still? Because again, in the midst of everything that's going on, the president is doing something to make somebody happy. And doing something to make somebody believe that he's the man that God would have there at this time. And the main group that this is reality for would be the evangelicals. The same people that brought you slavery and Jim Crow law, the same people that brought you silence in the drug epidemic in the black community, the same people that brought you silence in the police shooting and probably even encouragement, are the same people that are pro this. And they're the one that fill the administration. And if you've been following this event that was going on back in the past, major Christian universities like the Gerald Falwell University and other universities like that are major, basically had a plan of how they want to be able to train students to basically take over the government. So the preaching wasn't doing anything because they preach nothing. So their basic idea is that say they train students to become major part of the political apparatus and basically taking it over from the inside. So what you see as a regular person working there is basically a plan from the church to basically take over the government from the inside. And this is what many secular people don't understand what's really happening. So when he states that it is surprise, it's no surprise. It's been a long-going plan by, all of a sudden I can't remember the name, but like Liberty University and those university. These people have had a long-term plan of how to take over the government from the inside. It basically a coup without firing a shot in America. And this will happen because this is what the Bible predicts will happen. So how many believers, so he says you'll be surprised how many very dedicated Christians, dedicated people to take over the government. This is what is filling up the government. Now somebody say, is it filling up the government in the sense of filling up the government from a Republican point of view? No, it's just filling up the government, period. These people are just taking over the government. It don't matter who is in the office. America is going to do what it's going to do. Besides that, because America is beyond who gets elected. And you see that the policy doesn't change. The plan doesn't change. All that changes is just the figurehead. And he has power because he still is the executive. So keep that in mind. So if you look at it now, they see him as President Donald Trump as more significant than any president in the whole history of the United States. That is significant. Just imagine what they were able to do with their power base of tyranny and wickedness to people who are not white. Now imagine their power to continue if they have somebody in the White House who they view as more tyrannical than any other, or more able to listen to them, I should say, than any other president in U.S. history. So I'm just going by what they say. They're saying President Reagan didn't even come close. President Obama, they prayed for him, but they prayed for him at a distance, because many of them saw him as the devil himself. So this is what they're saying. So this is not something to take light, because this is not the president saying it of them. This is they saying it of the president, that the president is a person that evangelicals basically have the air and the access to like no other president in U.S. history. So this show you the changing role of religion, where now the secular government is basically seeded with very dedicated Christians, and evangelicals have access to the president and the White House like never before. And so here's one of the big problems. If they try to impeach President Trump, who becomes the next president? Because if President Trump gives them access, what you think would Vice President Pence would give them? And that's one of the things they want. So notice this here. And notice it's just not just praying, but they look at it as a relationship, a true friendship, a visit amongst friends. This is the new era that we're in. And this is making President Ronald Reagan look light. Notice also that they had endorsed really before President Trump, or then candidate Trump, they had endorsed Senator Marco Rubio and Senator Ted Cruz. These were two people that basically would be in a mindset and willingness to turn over the White House to the Christians and run the country as a Christian nation. And this would be the closest we'll get to a theocracy, these two gentlemen. Now remember, this is significant because there's a change that's going to happen under President Trump. So just to tell you how I see things going forward, there's a change going to happen under President Trump. It doesn't mean certain things will wrap up under President Trump. It just means certain things we're gonna move the process along further. Because remember, the aim was to drain the swamp, but exactly of who and of whom? Who is going to get position? Because remember, not every president when they come into office change as drastic as this president did. So often, whoever got in the position, as long as they lay their head low and they keep working, when a new president come in office, many of them will stay in power. But remember, these people are claiming to be very dedicated Christians. Dedicated to which Christian cause? The cause of Christ or the cause of some other strange entity? So note that. But note also, we don't know the future holds, but we note that Ted Cruz, very dedicated evangelical, Marco Rubio, very dedicated religious person. They're young and they need a little bit more time. The maturity was not really shown by Marco Rubio, especially. And Ted Cruz scared a lot of people. So I'm sure a 4 year or 8 year depends on what's happening, because if they lose power and then Democrats get back in power, these guys still have a good 8 year run where they can mature up, clean up some of their speech, state things better to sound more centrist while still, pulling along the evangelicals and the conservative base. So they still have time to mature up. Marco Rubio did seem a little bit more wet behind, a little bit wet behind the ear, not as mature. But remember, he himself was one of the best students of this concept of the Project for the New American Century. He was one of this idea that says really what we need to do is do certain military things and religious things to keep America going. That's the aim, because America is winning in power. So keep that in mind. We're going to go to our second article, and then I'm going to go back to some text before we depart from each other. So this other example here, second example here, is this Pew Research, or Barna Research, from Christian Post again. And this is America's top 10 most post-Christian cities, according to Barna. So it's a survey. The top 10 most post-Christian cities in America where residents are least likely to believe in God, or say that the Bible and Jesus are perfect, have been ranked in a study by Barna Group. 8 of the most post-Christian cities are in the Northeast, with Portland, Auburn, Maine topping the list, according to Barna report Tuesday. In order to qualify as post-Christian, respondents in the cities had to meet 9 or more identifying factors from a set list. The list includes categories such as do not believe in God, identify as atheist or agnostic, have never made a commitment to Jesus, have not prayed to God in the last week, agree that Jesus committed sins plural, fascinating, and disagree with the Bible's accuracy, among others. So this is a very thorough research, as you can hear, because the questions being asked are, not just do you believe in God or not. This is going deeper into the psyche. Barna explained that the type of question it used went beyond simply asking people to check a box for whether they are Christians or not, and delve into the core of what they actually believe. Barna include a top 100 ranking of such cities, with the top 10 listed right now. I'm going to read in a second. So this article here, or this research here, was done over a 7-year period. I'm going to read that in a second. So notice here what he's using to identify. And this is significant because remember, there's a change happening in America. And this change had happened in other countries. The morality and the religiosity is changing. But the preachers are not preaching anything, but they're figuring out how to grab power. So we see now that more and more research is being put into this, more and more research is proving the obvious, because I'm sure you move around, you see that people are not very religious. Even people in church, they take religion very lightly. But here we have the numbers coming out. So we're going to read the first 10, the top 10 society that are post-Christian. That means they used to be Christian and no longer primarily Christian. Portland, Auburn is number 1 in Maine. 57%. 57% of the people there claim to be no Christian at all. They fill out the thing and they meet 9 of the criteria. They're just really totally devoid of religion. Boston, Massachusetts, and this would be, I guess, and Manchester, New Hampshire. Those 2 cities came in at 56%, Boston and Manchester. Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. Albany, Schenectady, Troy, New York area, 54%. Providence, Rhode Island, and New Bedford, Massachusetts, came in at 53%. Burlington, Vermont, and Plattsburgh, New York, came in at 53%. Hartford, New Haven area in Connecticut came in at 52%. And New York came in at 51%. San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, California came in at 50%. So right there on the cusp. And Seattle, Tacoma area in Washington State came in at 50%. I was just there. And then Buffalo, New York came in at 50%. Right? So these areas are areas that are classified as areas that are post-Christian. There used to be Christian areas where the predominant amount of people living there were Christians. Now the predominant amount of people living there are right there on the border are non-Christians, right? All right, so right there, this is the change that has happened across there. So most of this is in the Northeast, as you notice there. Everything is in the Northeast except Seattle, Tacoma. So that's fascinating because, as I say, I was just over there and thinking and planning about doing a work in that Seattle, Tacoma area. And then San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose area. So those are the only two areas outside of the Northeast that came in the top 10 as being post-Christians. These people anymore don't believe. So there we've seen over and over again in major cities across the U.S. that it's post-Christian. And another place that I started working is in the New York area. And here is area. When I say not working, I mean doing church. So here's another area that 51%. So that's a plurality of people that don't believe anymore that they are they're Christian. So we see the change. So this is a change that it's not just a change that is happening in these big major cities, because remember, the largest part of America is in cities. But these changes are happening and it's affecting the pews. It's affecting church attendance. It's actually causing the closing of church. Because even though one might say, well, why would they include in the top 10 post-Christian San Jose, Seattle, and Buffalo? Because you only need 51 point something percent and you're post-Christian. So this is the type of thing that's happening across the United States. And as this happening, the society is not getting better for it, is getting worse. The immorality is not making people live better life or an actual connection with a church where they have some morality and being taught some level of morality. Things are getting worse because the secular society is moving in a certain direction. But not only that, the Christian society is moving in a certain direction because there's little preaching going on in the church. The end result is that as things change, the power base is changing in America. And the power base is leaving the church, and the pastors themselves are scheming to try to figure out, well, if we can't preach them and affect the society by preaching, well, we're going to take over the politics. This is why I say the change in role of religion in America. I'm going to continue reading the article to round this off before I go to some more points here. Borna pointed out that church attendance, religious affiliation, belief in God, prayer, and Bible reading have all been dropping for decades in America. So notice that. Church attendance is dropping. So again, if it drops, the churches lose their power. Religious affiliation. There's even somebody saying, I'm affiliated with a religious group. Wanting to say, I go to church, and another thing to say, okay, I don't really go to church, but I'm affiliated. Probably once a year, twice a year, Easter, Christmas, I go to church. That's not even happening. Belief in God, dropping. Prayer, dropping. Bible reading, dropping. By consequence, continue reading, the role of religion in public life has been slowly diminishing. And the church no longer functioned with the cultural authority it held in time past, it added. These are unique days for the church in America, as it's learned what it means to flourish in a new post-Christian era. The data are gathered from a nationwide random sample of 76,505 adults conducted over a 7-year period ending in April 2016. The margin of sampling error is plus or minus 0.4% points at a 95% confidence level, Barna said. Several different surveys have attempted to measure belief in God or lack thereof in America, though most have indeed shown that there has been a decline in Americans identified as religious over the decades. Analysts from Gallup poll data in December 2016 showed that 21% of U.S. respondents to a survey did not have a formal religious identity, while only 2 to 3% said the same in the 1940s and the 1950s. Gallup also found that church and other religious attendance have been declining. While 73% of respondents said in the 1937 that they were a member of a church, only 56% said the same in 2016. Additionally, 72% of those surveyed in 2016 said that religion is losing its influence on American life. Now, this is something that is being observed more and more. Now, again, you think about it, you even go to church, you find that religion is losing its influence on the people that go to church. The 56 that say they go. And when we say they go, or often you're in church, and probably 56% of the church is not even in attendance. The members of the church. How many churches you know that there's people on the books who you haven't seen in months? That technically they probably only go once, twice, a few times a year, once a quarter. And they're still members of a church. They're affiliated. So this is just telling you how bad it is. How many churches you know that you can't preach much morality? People get very upset and even storm out of the church. This is how bad it is. This is not talking about the people who say they're post-Christian. It's talking about the people who are Christian. So, but again now, 72% of those surveyed in 2016, they recognize the fact that the church is losing its influence. Also in 1937, 73% of people claimed that they belong to a church. Now that's down 56%. And that's 56% because some areas, like the evangelical areas, are still trying to hold on, even though they're losing ground. All denominations are losing ground in America. But although they're losing ground and so forth, 56%. So that's why the survey is so important, because it's simply showing that there's areas that 56% is really even worse. It's actually, as I said here before, 57% of people in Portland, Auburn, Maine, they are post-Christian. They don't even go to church. They don't affiliate. They don't believe in God. They don't read the Bible. They don't pray. They don't nothing. They just live and breathe, and they're not spiritual at all, probably except for yoga. So this number is real. If you look at the Gallup number, you look at the Barna number, you see that it's real. And when that happens, church attendance will reduce. If less church attendance, less power for the church, less money for the church, less institutions for the church. This is why so many churches in all denominations, it don't matter if Baptist, Catholic, Evangelicals, Adventists, they're closing institutions. It's not just because people are just not going to church, or should I say, not sending their kids to say school. It's because also they're not in the church. They're not members of the church. So they ain't sending no kids to no school. So their kids have dropped out. They have dropped out of the church, and they have to just close the institutions. There's nobody to go there. And this is what's been happening. So you can see, you see the decline. Now you see the numbers on the decline. And the numbers make sense, because if church attendance drop, well, you're going to have a drop in the institutions. The first institutions to get hit will be the schools. You're going to have to start closing schools, because no people, no kids. No kids, no school. You close the school. But is the problem happening because of quote-unquote secularism, in the sense of secular society? Or is the problem in the pulpit? where the pastors are preaching anything, and the end result is closed schools. Now, if you close schools, you will end up closing churches, because normally one of the biggest organs to keep the kids or the children in the school, in the church, is the school. So when you close the school, you're closing really churches long term, because those kids now are going to slowly grow up, and then they go to school, they go become more secularized, and then they go drop out of church, hence you close the church. So decrease attendance, religious affiliation, because if somebody religiously affiliated, every now and then they're going to turn up a church, they're going to drop a little offering, they're going to give that a little due, and they pay and hope that say God remember that they give offering, so God will save them. That's going to drop. So all of that now is just power base, money, everything lost. You see, like, and if you remember, quite a few years ago, talking about our denomination, they had to fire a whole bunch of pastors, in like Florida conference, New York conference. Why? Because what happened is that this reality has hit New York and places like Florida, even though they didn't come on the top 10 list. And so when you have this type of decline in the church, well, they had to fire the pastors, because the pastors were passing over churches that didn't have no members, because you have to be closing churches. There's no members, there's no tithe, you can't keep the pastors paid. So if you look at the list again, Albany, Schenectady, Troy, New York was on the top 10. Plattsburgh, New York, again in the top 10. New York, top 10. Buffalo, New York, top 10. You had at least 4 cities in New York alone, included the most important city in America, was on the top 10. So if they become post-Christian, where do you think the members went? What happened to those churches? Closed, or they still kept alive in many cases by immigrants. You go to those churches and you say, wait, this church is there about 30 years ago or 40 years ago. I came to this church, and this church was almost totally white. European people from European descent. Now I come back to this church, and this church is half filled, and is almost totally foreigners. What's going on here? Well, this is what happened. People, they become post-Christian. They don't believe in God anymore, and so many people I've met in the society, they don't believe in God. Even I've met people in the church don't believe in God. In reality, I have no faith in God, I should say. Prayer, Bible reading, they don't do. Total Bible illiterate. But you go to church and you see that in all denominations, Bible illiterate. Basically, without force, they have, basically in the Christian era or in the Protestant era in America, put the Bible away. They have got rid of the Bible. So this is what's happening. And so as this is happening across the United States, the church now has figured out that it has to do a few things. One of the things that's done is basically made the church more secularized to try to meet the unchurched. And they've brought in the rock and roll and the reggae and the hip hop to try to save the young people. And the more they do that, the young people leave. It's a gimmick. They're clowns for doing it. Very foolish people. Then they have brought in more secularized preachers. Now you have preachers that would just do a little 15-minute talk, and that's it. That's all you get in for church for the whole week. Imagine people not reading the Bible and praying, and they come to church for spirituality and they get 15 minutes. So this is causing more earthquake, and the pastors now are panicking, and they go into the government to try to save the church. And they have gone to a president who now needs to be saved himself. So the presidency need to be saved, and the pastors need to be saved, and they become good bedfellows. They're friends. You can understand why it makes sense. Then you have the situation here where, as the church continues to waste the power, it's going to the politics, it's going to a more secularized programming, and it also going to the president to say, give us some money so we can do things like faith-based initiatives and other initiatives like that, so we can take some of the money and you do voucher school. This is where people like Betsy Davos, the educational secretary, comes in. Because if you could turn over some of this private money or tax money to the churches, we might can get schools open because we don't have members who are willing to pay for it anymore because we lost our members. And especially we lost the members with money, which are normally the European members. So we can't really keep these schools open. So what we're going to do, we're going to ask the government now to save our skin. And then we probably can indoctrinate these kids and get back some members into our church via voucher schools. Won't work. It's madness that they're doing. It won't work. The Catholic Church has surely proven that it don't work. It's a destroyer of society and community. It won't work. We can see this. You can't force our religion in people. It's not a true religion. Religion has to be something that is exercised freely. You have to freely exercise it. And another significant thing that's keep coming up in my mind and bugging me in my head is Portland Auburn, Maine. Portland Auburn, Maine is significant in my mind, and it's significant. It should be significant in your mind because these are the areas that were once the areas of the Great Awakening area. Back in the time of Miller and the beginning of Adventism, this was the bedrock of Adventism. I find this fascinating. It's not per se what I wanted to talk about, but it keep coming up in my head. Portland, Maine, Boston, Massachusetts, Albany, Schenectady, Troy area, Providence, Rhode Island, New Bedford. Just listen to those names. Those names, if you ever read our history and church history and the Great Awakening, the time when they used to have, tent meetings and camp meetings and big preaching, Burlington, Vermont, Hartford, New Haven, Connecticut area, New York, Buffalo. These are areas that were like, wow. These were like the shining star in the Christian era, or the Great Awakening era in America. And now they've become post-Christian. Fascinating stuff. So what happened to all these churches in those areas? What they're preaching, what they're teaching, our MTR Day. This is what this is saying. So this is why this is so significant for me, because I'm like, if you read all of this history, you find this fascinating that these areas now are areas that have become post-Christian. So the Bible teaches us some things here that are important. Again, we'll read 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 1 through 4. Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not so soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, or as from us, as that day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a what? A falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. So notice the Bible predicts that before the coming of wickedness, or before the coming of the man of sin in the last days and some terrible deception, there has to be a falling away first. And we're recognizing this, that there's a shaking, there's a falling away, people just dropping out of the church, people dropping out of religion. This is literally what's happening. And so this is what the Bible predicts will happen. And it continues verse 4, this person who is the son of perdition, who opposed and exalted himself above all that is called God, and that is worshipped, so that he as God, sitting in the temple of God, showed himself to be God. What really had happened, that text I just read is from a global point of view. If you understand, you get what's said there. But I'm going to make it from a local church point of view. There's things that happen in local church that won't happen unless the church decline morally. And what's happening, that the moral decline of the church is really what is in view here. Either we're talking about the evangelicals running over to President Trump to try to save their schools and their churches, or the president going over to the evangelical to save his presidency, or all the type of abominations that have been brought in the church, where now you can have a full rock band, you can have full rappers, and all this type of stuff. You can have a girl goes up in a Daisy Duke for the pulpit to do the worship service. You could have gay choir director and all that. What's happening there? All that is a testimony of the moral decline of the church. All what I just said. And because the church has morally declined, then it's possible that anything goes. It's a statement where you have old preachers and pastors in the 80s coming out and saying they're pro homosexual marriage and they're pro anything that is abominable. The only reason they're pro it is because of their lifestyle and what has been going on in the church for decades. So the church itself has morally declined. The society has morally declined. And everybody's in need of salvation, but the people that's supposed to be teaching the way of God, they themselves are a mess. This is what's happening. And they're not looking to go to the political system to try to save their skin, save their institutions, quote unquote. Not save their souls, save their institutions, save their, as I say, schools and churches and various different other institutions that are connected to it. Instead of saying we need to turn back to God, they're turning to the government and claiming they're doing this for God. Won't work. So in order for certain things to happen in your church or in any church or in any society, the moral fabric of the society or the person or the church has to be so brought low and down that they'll say anything goes. This is what we see happening right in our before our very eyes. So again, this is the troubles that we're facing. And so I'll read 1 John chapter 2 verse 15 through 17. 1 John 2 verse 15 through 17 says, "Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passeth away, and the lust thereof. But he that doeth the will of God abideth forever." So this is really where the problem comes. People want to live the life they want to live and not understand that there's some consequence. And the consequence has been playing out over and over again. The moral fabric of the society has been slowly but surely in decline. We see areas that were once very religious areas, were once very moral areas, have become now cesspools, violent murders, drug overdose. You think about this area again, which will me just keep fascinating me. Portland, Maine. These are areas that they're having a heroin epidemic right now. All these areas that we look at and we say, well, yeah, they become post-Christians. They're also drug epidemic areas. They become gripped with drug use. We think about areas that are supposed to be part of the Bible Belt, Tennessee, West Virginia, gripped in a drug epidemic. So the connection between the morality is fascinating, because it's not like they became post-Christian and they're living more upstanding lifestyle. They become post-Christians and they become, fully embracing of drugs, marijuana, heroin, coke, crack, meth, every single different crazy fentanyl drug that has come out, various different forms. That's what they've increased with. Not only that, but some of these areas like the San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose area have become fully embracing of homosexual lifestyle and other type of abhorrent behavior. So the removal of Christianity has not blessed them, it has made them worse. But then again, many people are doing these lifestyle practices themselves or Christians. So that's why the Bible symbols tell us that we should not love the world, because if we love the world, the love of the Father is not in us. And it simply goes back to the lust of the flesh, whether it be drugs, alcohol, or sensual pleasures. The lust of the eyes, just to look at stuff and see stuff that's shiny. Human beings, we like shiny stuff because they look nice, don't they? And the pride of life, this is what causing so many problems with all these different financial crash. People want stuff and they want it right now in credit. But this year is of the world, is not of the Father. And we want this to live our life where we live our life committed to following Jesus. This is what we want. And this is what we preach. And this is why we preach what we preach. Because you either have to be all for Jesus and surrender all of your sins to Jesus, or the world will be at your heels. We're close to pray. Our Father who art in heaven, we pray that you may continue to bless us and be with us. Pray, dear Father, that we might walk, dear Father, in the straight and narrow, and teach men to do likewise. May you bless us, dear Lord, as we walk humbly before thee. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks for being with me on Revive Form Radio. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow morning where we should talk about wisdom for living. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.